Gloria Tomas. I'm 34 years old, and last Christmas my younger sister accidentally added me to the family group chat. 52 messages, every single one of them detailing a holiday they were planning without me for the third consecutive year. My mother, Eleanor, typed it out in plain, unvarnished text. Make absolutely sure she doesn't find out. My older brother, Julian, replied right underneath it. Just tell her the wrong date like we did last year. My father, Richard, didn't even use words. He just sent a laughing emoji, the one with the tears of joy, a digital monument to his indifference. I was sitting in a dimly lit hotel room at the Seaport Marriott in Boston, 400 miles away from my hometown of Port Haven, Massachusetts, and I read every single word. I screenshotted all of it, and on Christmas morning, I typed exactly one line back into that chat. Merry Christmas. Your realtor will explain the rest. The group went dead. Then the calls started. 104 of them in a single hour. But here is what none of them thought to check, what none of them bothered to verify in their desperate coordinated rush to erase me. A document filed at the Essex County Registry of Deeds 8 years ago, signed by a woman who loved me more than any of them ever bothered to. 52 messages showed me exactly where I stood in their affections. One message showed them where the ground beneath their feet was about to give way. Welcome to the anatomy of a structural failure. I spend my life analyzing load paths, stress fractures, and the hidden weaknesses in things that appear solid. I am a forensic structural engineer. I design retrofit solutions for historic bridges, evaluate the foundational integrity of aging high-rises, and determine why things collapse. I have been licensed for a decade, and I spend about 40% of my time on the road, staying in anonymous hotels like this one, eating dinner alone over blueprints, and billing hours. I am exceptionally good at my job. I am good at it because I am patient with microscopic details, I never skip a step in the diagnostic process, and I know how to look for the rot that hides behind fresh paint. Those are precisely the qualities my family has never once found interesting. Growing up in the coastal salt air town of Port Haven, I was the middle child who turned in her homework on time, who noticed when the gutters were clogged, who kept her head down, while Julian played varsity lacrosse and charmed the local country club, and Chloe did competitive equestrian shows and demanded the spotlight. Eleanor drove them. Richard cheered. I rode my bicycle to the public library. That was fine. I told myself that busy, important people get forgotten, and I kept telling myself that lie for years to survive the quiet ache of being invisible. I sent the Christmas gifts on time every year. I booked the reservation at the country club for Eleanor's birthday 3 years running. When Richard needed his vintage Porsche moved for a specialized engine surgery, I drove 3 hours on a rainy Thursday to do it. When the roof of their primary residence leaked during a nor'easter, and Julian was too busy networking at a gala to check on it, I called the contractor from a job site in Maine and paid the emergency deposit over the phone. I never asked to be thanked. I just assumed that being useful was the same as being included. I assumed that if I bore enough of the load, I would eventually be allowed to sit at the table. And still, last December, I showed up at their house on the 28th, the exact date they had given me, with a casserole dish full of wild mushroom and Gruyere and a bottle of expensive Bordeaux, and the door was locked. The lights were off. The holiday wreath was still on the hook, but nobody was home. I called Eleanor. She picked up on the 5th ring, her voice light, airy, completely unbothered. "Oh, honey, I thought we told you we did Christmas on the 25th this year. It was a last-minute change. You know how it is." I stood on the porch with the casserole cooling in my hands, the wind whipping off the Atlantic, and I said, "That's okay. My fault for not checking. It was not my fault, and it was not last minute. I just didn't know that yet." Back in the hotel room, the glow of the laptop screen painting my face in harsh blue light, I hit message 31 and my stomach dropped into a freefall. Julian had typed, "Closing's the 26th. Just keep her clear till then." Closing. I read it 3 times. Closing on what? 2 messages later, Eleanor. "Victoria says the buyer wants a walkthrough Christmas afternoon, so we need the place completely empty by noon." Victoria. A buyer, a walkthrough. They were selling something, and whatever it was, they needed me out of the way to do it. I set the phone face down on the polyester bedspread and stared at the wall, and the only thing I could think about was my grandmother's house. Abuela Sylvia's house. The grand peeling Victorian on 88 Willow Creek Lane. 3 stories of cedar shingles and wraparound porches. A turret that caught the morning sun. A mailbox shaped like a lighthouse that Sylvia's husband had built before I was born. I lived there the summer after my freshman year of college, when I couldn't afford the dorm deposit and didn't want to ask my parents for money. Sylvia let me sleep in the upstairs bedroom, with the sloped ceiling and the window that overlooked the backyard weeping willow. She made me strong, black coffee every morning at 6 o'clock and told me to study hard, to build things that last, and not to worry about the rest. That house was the only place I never had to explain why I was there. I had a key. I still have it. A heavy, ornate iron skeleton key. Heavier than the others on my ring, cold to the touch, cut in a style they don't manufacture anymore. Sylvia gave it to me the year she turned 75, in front of the whole family at Thanksgiving. She pressed it into my palm and said, "This is your home whenever you need one, Gloria." Eleanor rolled her eyes. Julian was on his phone. Richard nodded politely and went back to the football game. None of them thought it meant anything. They thought it was a sentimental gesture from a sentimental old woman. They didn't understand that Sylvia never did anything without a blueprint. The phone on the bedspread buzzed again. I picked it up. Another message in the chat. I kept reading. Message 36 was the one that finally calcified the ice in my veins. Eleanor, all caps for emphasis. Make sure she doesn't find out. Not whispered, not implied. Typed in black and white and sent to 4 people who all hit the like button. 2 messages later, Richard, my father, the man who taught me how to change a tire in the driveway. The man who claimed he valued hard work and honesty, sent another laughing emoji. He didn't even type a word. He just laughed at my exclusion. I screenshotted that one twice because my hands were shaking and the first capture was blurred. I want to be clear about something. I didn't screenshot those messages to use as weapons in a petty family squabble. I did it because I was alone in a hotel room. The air conditioner was humming a low mechanical drone. My chest was compressing like a vice, and I needed empirical proof that I wasn't hallucinating the toxicity of my own bloodline. I've spent years smoothing things over. Years telling myself the missed invitations were scheduling errors, the wrong dates were honest mistakes, and the silence after I left a voicemail was just everyone being busy. 52 messages killed every excuse I'd ever built to keep my heart from breaking. They weren't forgetting me. They were coordinating around me. There was a calendar, a buyer, a closing date, and a meticulously crafted plan to keep me blind while they did whatever they were doing with Sylvia's house. The only place that ever felt like mine. And they'd built the plan on the fundamental assumption that I would never push back, never question, never check. Because I never had. That was my designated role in the family ecosystem. The reliable, absent, load-bearing wall, who signed what she was told to sign, showed up when she was told to show up, and disappeared the rest of the time without making a sound, absorbing the stress so the facade could remain pretty. I sat in that hotel room until midnight, reading the thread forward and backward, analyzing the syntax of their betrayal. And the thing that kept circling, the load that didn't add up, was the phrase like last year, which meant last year wasn't an accident either. The locked door, the cold casserole, the light voice on the phone, all of it was the same play run twice. My thumb hovered over the call button next to Eleanor's name for 11 seconds. I counted. 11 seconds of picturing the conversation. I'd say I saw the chat. She'd go quiet. Then she'd cry. Then she'd tell me I was being dramatic, that I was ruining the holidays, that I was always so selfish. Then I'd apologize for making her feel bad about making me feel invisible. I'd done that math before. I knew the answer. The structural integrity of that conversation was 0. So I pulled my thumb back and locked the phone. I sat on the edge of the bed, with both hands flat on my knees, the way I sit when I'm reading a structural report that doesn't add up, still focused, looking for the load that's not where it should be. And I asked myself one question: what exactly are they selling? Because here's the thing. Julian typed, "Closing's the 26th. That's real estate language." Eleanor mentioned a buyer and a walkthrough. Victoria is a person who arranges those things. If they were selling Sylvia's house, that was a massive problem, but it was also a question. Sylvia died 3 years ago. The house should have gone through probate, or a trust, or whatever she'd set up. And I didn't know the answer because nobody had ever told me. Nobody asked me to sign anything. Nobody mentioned an estate attorney, or a closing date, or a buyer until 52 messages fell into my lap by accident. So, before I said a single word to anyone, I needed to know what I was actually dealing with, not the emotions. The paper. The recorded, filed, notarized paper. I turned on the brass desk lamp, opened my laptop, and typed the Essex County Registry of Deeds online portal into the search bar. While the county website loaded slowly, the way small government portals always do, buffering and spinning, I unclipped my keyring from my work bag and held it under the lamp. 4 keys. My apartment, my car, my office badge fob, and the iron one. Sylvia's key was thicker than the rest, heavily tarnished, with a complex bow that dug into my palm when I squeezed it. I'd carried it for 8 years. Never took it off the ring, even after she died, even after I stopped going to the house because it hurt too much, and because nobody invited me anyway. The night she gave it to me, Thanksgiving, she'd pulled me aside after the dishes were done and the football was on, and the house smelled like pine needles and old paper. The whole family was in the living room. She walked me to the front door, took the key off a hook by the coat closet, and pressed it into my hand. "This is your home whenever you need one, Gloria." She said it loud enough that Eleanor looked up from her phone. Richard glanced over. Julian didn't. Chloe was 19 and drawing on her phone. Eleanor had smiled the way she smiles when she thinks someone is being theatrical, a tight lift at the corners, no teeth. "Mom, she's not homeless," Eleanor had said. Sylvia didn't look at her. She looked at me. "Keep it." I nodded. I didn't understand then why she said it that way, like she was handing me something heavier than a key, like it was a document, not a gesture. The county recorder's page finally loaded. I typed in the address. 88 Willow Creek Lane, Port Haven, Massachusetts. The search wheel spun. I set the iron key on the desk next to the laptop and waited. The recorder's site was basic: a white page, blue links, a search bar that looked like it hadn't been updated since the dial-up era. I got a list of documents associated with the property. The original purchase deed from 1978, when my grandparents bought the place, a refinance in 1999, a satisfaction of mortgage in 2010, and then one more entry, a quit-claim deed recorded 8 years ago with a document number I could click. I clicked it. The scan took 30 seconds to load. Grainy, slightly tilted on the page, the way county scans always are. At the top, quitclaim deed. Grantor, Sylvia Marie Tomas. Grantees, plural. Line 1, Eleanor Patricia Tomas. Line 2, Gloria Marie Tomas. Tenants in common. I read it again. And again. I wasn't looking at a family tradition or a sentimental gesture. I was looking at a recorded legal instrument that said I owned half of that house. Not symbolically, not emotionally. On paper. Filed with the county. Indexed and searchable by anyone with a browser and the address. I sat back in the cheap desk chair and let it roll back 6 inches. Sylvia hadn't just given me a key. She'd given me the deed. And she'd done it publicly, through the proper channel, with a notary stamp and a filing number, because she knew. She must have known, with the terrifying clarity of a woman who had outlived her husband and watched her daughter turn into a stranger, that a key can be taken back, a lock can be changed, but a recorded document can't be wished away. She hadn't been theatrical, she'd been tactical. Quietly, precisely, without asking permission from anyone in the family who would have told her not to. I pulled up the rest of the filings. There was no subsequent transfer, no deed from me to anyone else, no court order, no quitclaim releasing my interest. My name was still on that house the same way it had been, since the day Sylvia signed the paper. The county recorder didn't care that I hadn't visited in 3 years. The county recorder didn't care that my family had stopped setting a plate for me. The county recorder only knew what was filed. And what was filed said Gloria Marie Tomas was an owner. I remember the day she signed it. I was 25, home for a weekend because Sylvia had called and asked me to come. She'd had a minor stroke 2 months earlier. A TIA, the doctors called it. Transient ischemic attack. The kind that resolves but warns you the next one might not. She was sharp again by the time I arrived, standing in the kitchen making iced tea like nothing had happened. But she had an appointment the next morning, she said, and she wanted me to come with her. I assumed it was medical. It wasn't. We drove to a small office on Main Street, a notary public who doubled as a tax preparer. Sylvia had papers already drawn up. She sat across from the notary and explained calmly that she wanted to add me to the title on 88 Willow Creek Lane. Tenants in common, she said, like she'd rehearsed it. So the house doesn't get tangled up in probate later, and so Gloria has a place that's legally hers. She signed. I signed. The notary stamped it, and we dropped the original at the recorder's office on the way home. The whole thing took 40 minutes. When we got back to the house, Eleanor was in the kitchen, Sylvia told her. She didn't hide it. Eleanor's face went flat, the mask slipping. You're putting Gloria on the deed? Not me. Sylvia poured 2 glasses of tea and handed me one. You're already on it, Eleanor. Now Gloria is too. Eleanor set her jaw. This is dramatic, Mom. She doesn't even live here. She's never going to use it. Sylvia didn't argue. She just said, the paper's filed. It's done. I remember feeling awkward, like I'd been handed a gift I hadn't earned in front of someone who thought I didn't deserve it. I thanked Sylvia and changed the subject. I didn't understand what she'd actually given me. I do now. Back in the hotel, 2 o'clock in the morning, I had the deed scan open in one tab and the group chat screenshots in another. I toggled between them like I was cross-referencing a structural report against field conditions. The deed said I was a co-owner. The chat said they were selling. And the math was simple. You can't easily sell a house when someone else's name is on the title. That's not a loophole or a technicality. That's property law. If my name was on the deed, and it was, right there in the county's own database, scanned and indexed, then no title company would clear the closing without questions. No buyer's lender would approve a loan on a clouded title. The sale might not die instantly, but it would stall hard. And stalling a real estate closing a week before Christmas is close enough to killing it. I closed the laptop and lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The air conditioner hummed. My phone sat dark on the nightstand, finally quiet after hours of buzzing. I thought about calling Sylvia. That was the reflex. 3 years dead, and I still reached for her number when things didn't make sense. She would have known what to do. She always did. She planned 8 years ahead and filed the paper that proved it. She didn't tell me what to do with it, because she trusted me to figure it out when the time came. I turned on my side and looked at the iron key on the desk, sitting next to the laptop like a small patient witness. The county recorder confirmed what Sylvia set up. My family confirmed what they were trying to do. The only question left was what I would do with both pieces of information. I didn't have an answer yet, but I had something better. I had time. The closing was December 26th. It was December 3rd. 23 days. The next morning, Eleanor called. I let it ring 3 times before I answered because I needed 3 rings to flatten my voice into something normal, something compliant. Hi, sweetheart. She sounded warm. She always sounds warm when she wants something to go smoothly. So, Christmas. We're keeping it small this year. Just the 4 of us at the house. You know how it is. But if you're back from your project by the 28th, you could swing by for leftovers. The 28th. There it was, delivered on schedule exactly as the chat prescribed. I held the phone away from my ear for a second and looked at the screenshot still open on my laptop. Message 14, Eleanor. The 28th. Say we're doing a small thing on the 28th. She was reading from her own script. That sounds fine, Mom. I'll check my schedule. Perfect. Don't bring anything fancy, just yourself. She laughed. I didn't. I said goodbye and hung up and sat very still for a long time. The worst part wasn't the lie. I'd been lied to before. About schedules, about why I wasn't included, about whether they'd received the gift I sent. The worst part was how easy it was for her. The rhythm of her voice, the warmth she manufactured, the little laugh at the end. All of it practiced, all of it aimed at keeping me exactly where I was, far away, uninformed, and grateful for leftovers. She didn't even hesitate on the date. No pause, no stumble, no flicker of guilt in the word 28th. Just the number, delivered smooth like a receptionist confirming an appointment. I saved the call log, not the audio, just the timestamp. December 4th, 9:47 a.m., duration 2 minutes and 11 seconds. 2 minutes to lie to your daughter. She didn't even need 3. 2 days later, Chloe called. She didn't mean to tell me anything. She just talked too much, the way she always does when she's nervous, filling the silence with trivialities to avoid the truth. She started with small talk. Her job as a luxury event planner, a guy she'd been seeing in Boston, a complaint about the humidity. Then she mentioned Julian, and her voice shifted, dropping an octave, losing its airy veneer. He's been really stressed. The firm's not doing great. Julian ran a bespoke landscape architecture and hardscaping firm on the North Shore. He'd opened it 5 years ago with a massive loan co-signed by Eleanor. I knew about the loan because Eleanor had mentioned it once, proudly, at a dinner I was actually invited to, one of the last ones. "How bad?" I asked. Chloe paused. "Bad, like the bank sent letters bad. Mom's on the hook too because she co-signed. So if he defaults..." She trailed off. I didn't push. I didn't need to. The picture assembled itself. Julian's business was going under. The co-signed loan meant Eleanor's credit, and possibly her retirement savings, were exposed, and selling Sylvia's house was the fastest way to cover the gap. The house was paid off, no mortgage. In a market like Port Havens, a 3-story Victorian on a half-acre of ocean-adjacent land might bring $800,000, maybe $9,000, enough to clear the loan, enough to bail Julian out and get Eleanor off the hook, enough to matter. And there it was, the shape of the thing I hadn't been able to see from the group chat alone. This wasn't about hating me. It wasn't personal the way a slap is personal. It was financial triage, and I was the complication they'd decided to root around rather than include. They didn't cut me out because they were angry. They cut me out because involving me would mean admitting they needed something from me, and admitting that would mean treating me as someone whose answer mattered. That was the part they couldn't stomach. All they needed to close was one signature they assumed I'd hand over without reading the fine print. Or better yet, one signature they could avoid needing if they just kept me out of the room entirely. Chloe circled back to small talk. I let her. Before we hung up, she said something that stuck. "We just didn't think you'd care about the old place. It's just a bunch of dusty wood and memories, right?" I said goodnight and wrote the sentence down on the hotel notepad, word for word. December 10th. I'd been back at the bridge site for a week, driving rebar schedules during the day and reading Massachusetts real estate law at night. I downloaded the full deed scan from the county recorder's website and saved it to a folder on my desktop labeled 88 Willow Creek. The document was 2 pages. Page 1, the standard quitclaim language. Sylvia Marie Thomas, grantor, does hereby quitclaim to Eleanor Patricia Thomas and Gloria Murray Thomas as tenants in common the following described property. Then the legal description, lot number, tax parcel ID, all of it recorded and stamped. Page 2, Sylvia's signature, mine, the notary's seal, the filing date. I printed both pages on the hotel's business center printer and put them in a manila folder. I held the folder in my hands for a long time. It weighed almost nothing. Tenants in common. I'd looked it up carefully by now. It meant Eleanor and I each owned an undivided interest in the property. Not half the kitchen and half the yard. Half of all of it. And the critical part, neither of us could sell the whole property without the other's consent. Eleanor couldn't convey my interest. She couldn't sign for me. She couldn't close a sale that transferred 100% of 88 Willow Creek Lane to a buyer unless I signed the deed of sale too. If she tried, the title company would flag it the moment they ran the title search, which meant one of 2 things. Either they hadn't told the title company about me or they had. And the plan was to get my signature separately, quietly, framed as something else. I closed the manila folder and put it in my work bag next to the iron key. 2 pieces of Sylvia, sitting side by side, waiting. I went back to the group chat screenshots. Message 31, Julian. Closing's the 26th. Just keep her clear till then. Message 33, Eleanor. Victoria says the buyer wants a walk-through Christmas afternoon. Victoria. I searched Victoria Sterling Realtor, Port Haven, Massachusetts, and found her in 4 seconds. Sterling Coastal Properties, a boutique brokerage on the harbor. Headshot on the website with a blazer and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She had the listing for 88 Willow Creek Lane on her page. 3 stories, 4 bedrooms, wraparound porch, asking $850,000. Listed 3 weeks ago. Contact agent for details. I stared at the listing photos. Someone had staged the living room. Sylvia's velvet reading chair was gone, replaced by a sterile gray sectional I didn't recognize. The kitchen had been painted a trendy, soulless white. The porch railing where I used to sit with my coffee was sanded and restained. The upstairs bedroom, my bedroom, the one I'd slept in during college, had been emptied and arranged with furniture from a catalog. They'd erased Sylvia from the house before they'd even sold it. They'd been preparing this for weeks, maybe months. And the closing was December 26th, the day after the Christmas gathering I was being steered away from. I did the math. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't excluded me because I was inconvenient or boring or too busy to bother with. They'd excluded me because keeping me away from the house was a logistical requirement for the sale. If I showed up on Christmas, I might see the staging. I might ask why the furniture was different. I might notice the lockbox on the front door. The wrong date wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was project management. I was a variable they needed to control. I closed the listing tab, opened a blank document, and typed one line. Do not react. Do not confront. Let the system work. Then I saved the file, shut the laptop, and went to bed. I didn't sleep. December 12th, I called a real estate attorney. Not a family friend, not anyone from Port Haven. A licensed, ruthless litigator in Boston whose office I found through the state bar's referral line. Arthur Pendleton, a man who sounded like he chewed gravel for breakfast. I told him the situation in about 4 minutes. Co-owner on a recorded deed, tenants in common, property listed for sale, closing scheduled. No one has asked me to sign or inform me of the transaction. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That closing is almost certainly not happening without you." I asked him to be specific. He was. No title company he'd ever worked with would issue a clear title policy if a recorded co-owner hadn't signed the conveyance. The buyer's lender, if there was a lender, would require clear title before funding. Even if it was a cash sale, no competent closing agent would proceed, knowing there was an unreleased interest on the deed. Your signature isn't optional, he said. It's structural. I almost laughed at the word. Structural, that's my job. Finding the piece that holds the rest together, the one you can't remove without the whole thing shifting. I asked him what would happen if they tried to close anyway. He said the title search would flag my name, the closing would stall, and the buyer would likely walk. Or, if my family wanted to force a sale without my agreement, they'd have to file a partition action, a lawsuit, heard in open court, public record, months of process, thousands in legal fees. In my experience, he said, families who are trying to hide things don't want that. I thanked him, paid the consultation fee, and hung up. I wrote down one sentence from the call on the hotel notepad, underlined it twice. Your signature isn't optional, it's structural. Then I sat with it. 23 days had become 14. I still hadn't said a word to any of them. I could have called Eleanor that night. I had the screenshots, the deed, and the attorney's confirmation. I could have laid it all out. The group chat, the wrong dates, the listing photos with Sylvia's chair replaced by a stranger's sofa. I could have made her explain herself. But I'd been through enough conversations with Eleanor Tomas to know how they end. She cries. She reframes. She tells me I'm hurting her by being hurt. And somewhere around minute 12, I find myself apologizing for noticing what she did. Not this time. I didn't want a confrontation. I wanted a process. The kind of outcome that doesn't depend on anyone feeling guilty because guilt requires a conscience. And I was no longer sure they had one available for me. I've spent my career building things that hold up under pressure. Bridges, retaining walls, structures that stand because the math is right, not because somebody promised they would. I believe in systems, and the system already had my answer. The deed was filed. The title search would find it. The closing would stall. I didn't need to raise my voice. The Essex County Registry of Deeds had already spoken for me 8 years ago. So I decided I wouldn't sign the sale documents of Karen's. I wouldn't confront anyone. I wouldn't explain or argue or plead. I would contact the realtor directly, identify myself as a co-owner on the recorded deed, and let the title company do what title companies do. Verify ownership, flag the discrepancy, and halt the closing until every party with a legal interest had been consulted. I wasn't going to shout the truth. I was going to file it. And on Christmas morning, after they'd gathered at the house and toasted their success and congratulated themselves on keeping me blind, I would send one message into that group chat, the one they'd accidentally let me see, and let the system handle the rest. One message. That was all I'd need. I didn't know the words yet, but I knew the shape of them, short, calm, and pointing somewhere they couldn't argue with. I picked up the iron key and turned it over in my fingers. 14 days. December 15th. I composed an email to Victoria Sterling at Sterling Coastal Properties. I kept it professional, the same tone I use when I send a field report to a general contractor. Dear Ms. Sterling, my name is Gloria Tomas. I am writing regarding the property at 88 Willow Creek Lane, Port Haven, Massachusetts, currently listed through your office. I am a recorded co-owner of this property as a tenant in common per a quitclaim deed filed with the county recorder 8 years ago. I have not been contacted regarding the pending sale or asked to sign any conveyance documents. I would appreciate confirmation of the transaction status and clarification on how my ownership interest is being addressed in the closing process. I can be reached at this email or by phone. I read it 3 times, checked the deed recording number, attached the scanned copy, and sent it. Victoria Sterling called me 4 hours later. Her voice was professional but tight. The voice of someone recalculating a deal in real time, realizing the ground was shifting. Ms. Tomas, thank you for reaching out. I've reviewed the deed you attached, and I've also pulled the title report. I need to verify a few things with the title company. Can I call you back? She called back the next morning. The title search confirmed my name on the deed. The closing, she said carefully, could not proceed as currently structured without my participation. She asked if I'd been in contact with the other owner, Eleanor Thomas, about the sale. No, I said. I learned about it through other channels. A pause. I see. I'll need to inform the seller and the buyer's agent that there's an unresolved ownership issue. That's fine, I said. I'd prefer all communication regarding the property go through proper channels. I gave her Arthur's contact. She thanked me and hung up. The fuse was lit. I didn't need to touch it again. December 19th, a PDF arrived in my email from Eleanor. No subject line, just an attachment labeled estate_cleanup_docs.pdf and a one-line message. Gloria, can you sign these and send back before the 24th? Just routine estate paperwork from Sylvia's trust. Thanks, Mom. I opened the PDF on my laptop, and the first page was not routine estate paperwork. It was a deed of sale, a conveyance document transferring all interest in 88 Willow Creek Lane from Eleanor Patricia Thomas and Gloria Marie Thomas to a buyer named Marcus Vance for a purchase price of $850,000. My signature line was on page 4, flagged with a yellow tab and the word sign in Chloe's handwriting. I recognized the loopy C. The purchase price was listed. The buyer's name was there. The legal description matched 88 Willow Creek down to the lot number. Page 5 was a schedule showing the proceeds going to a single bank account. Eleanor's, not split, not shared. 100% of the sale price, minus closing costs, routed to Eleanor Patricia Thomas. My name was on the signature line, but nowhere in the payment section. They didn't just want me to sign away my ownership. They wanted me to do it for free. They hadn't even tried to hide what it was. They just bet that I wouldn't read it. Just initial where the tabs are, sweetheart. Don't overthink it. That's what Eleanor would say if I called to ask. I could hear the sentence in her head, fully formed, ready to deploy. They wanted my signature on a document that would erase my ownership of the only place that ever felt like home, and they wrapped it in a PDF called Estate Cleanup and sent it 4 days before Christmas like it was a holiday card. I saved the file. I forwarded it to Arthur. And I did not sign. I didn't reply to Eleanor's email either. I left it sitting in my inbox, read but unanswered, the way they'd left me standing on a porch with a cold casserole last December. Acknowledged just enough to confirm I existed and then ignored. That night, I held the iron key in my closed fist and sat on the hotel bed in the dark. The deed of sale was still open on the laptop screen, glowing blue-white across the room. I thought about Sylvia, not the legal version, not the grantor on a quitclaim deed, but the real one. The woman who made strong coffee without measuring, who kept a stack of architectural digests by the back door, who noticed when I was quiet and never once told me I was too sensitive for noticing what I noticed. She signed that deed because she saw this coming. Maybe not the details, not Julian's failing firm, or Eleanor's desperation, or the group chat, or the PDF disguised as routine paperwork, but the shape of it. She saw that I would be the one they stepped around, and she put my name on the one thing they couldn't sell without me. That wasn't sentimentality. That was engineering. The key in my hand was cold from the night air. I opened my palm and looked at it. The complex bow, the tarnished iron, the teeth cut for a lock that still worked on a door I hadn't opened in 3 years. It wasn't a keepsake anymore. It was a title. It was proof that someone had looked at me and said, not with words, but with a notary stamp, she belongs here. I closed my hand around it again. I still hadn't replied to Eleanor's email. I still hadn't signed anything. And in 6 days, Victoria Sterling was going to walk into a closing meeting and tell my family that the sale couldn't proceed because the woman they'd written off the guest list was written onto the deed. I typed my one message into the chat's draft field and saved it. I'd send it Christmas morning, December 23rd. I'd finished the bridge project 2 days early. My team lead said I could head home for the holiday if I wanted. I drove back to my apartment in Boston instead of to Port Haven. I unpacked, did laundry, watered the fern on my kitchen counter that was somehow still alive, and sat down at my own desk for the first time in a month. The manila folder was in my bag. I took it out and set it next to the iron key, which I'd placed on the desk like a paperweight. Both objects from Sylvia, both quiet, both loaded. I opened the group chat on my phone one more time. The conversation had continued without me. More logistics, more coordination. Chloe asked if she should bring a specific type of artisanal cheese. Julian confirmed the walkthrough time with the buyer's agent. Eleanor reminded everyone to keep things normal if Gloria texted. Richard didn't type anything new. He didn't need to. His laughing emoji was still sitting there in the scroll, like a monument to his apathy. I looked at my saved draft. I'd written and rewritten it over 3 weeks, and every version kept shrinking until it was just one short line. Merry Christmas. Your realtor will explain the rest. No accusation, no emotion, no exclamation marks. I wasn't going to explain what I knew or how I knew it. I wasn't going to give them a thread to pull or a tone to criticize. I was going to point them toward the one person who had the authority and the obligation to tell them the truth. The realtor whose title search had already flagged my name. I didn't block anyone. I wanted them to read it together in the same chat where they'd planned my absence, at the same table where they'd gathered without me. Christmas Eve. The group chat lit up one last time. Not that they knew I was watching. Julian posted a photo of the house, freshly staged, porch lights on, a wreath that wasn't Sylvia's on the door. Chloe replied with heart emojis. Eleanor typed, "Tomorrow's going to be perfect. Don't forget, nobody mentions Gloria. She thinks it's the 28th. Richard sent a Santa emoji. I read it from my couch in Boston with a mug of tea going cold in my hands. Nobody mentions Gloria. 3 words that summarized a decade of holiday math. Every last-minute change, every locked door, every, "Oh, we thought we told you." It wasn't casual, it was policy. I set the phone face down on the couch cushion. Outside, someone in the apartment above mine was playing jazz music, the bass thudding through the ceiling like a slow heartbeat. I thought about what tomorrow would look like from their side. Julian relieved, pouring coffee, talking through the walkthrough with the buyer's agent. Eleanor, orchestrating the table, fussing with napkins, satisfied that everything was on track. Richard quiet in his recliner, watching whatever game was on. Chloe setting out plates for 4 instead of 5, not counting the absence because she'd stopped counting it years ago. They'd raise a glass, they'd eat. They'd feel good about the closing, and good about the holiday, and good about the fact that the one person who could have complicated things was sitting in Boston, believing the party was on the 28th. And at some point in the morning, probably around 10 o'clock when they were all together and comfortable and certain, my message would land in the chat like a stone dropped into still water. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt the way I feel when a bridge inspection comes back and the numbers are exactly what the drawing said they'd be. Clear, verified, done. I washed my mug, set my alarm for 7 o'clock, and went to bed early. The iron key was on the nightstand. The manila folder was in my desk drawer. Tomorrow the paper would speak for itself. Christmas morning. I woke at 7, made coffee, and sat at my desk. I opened the group chat. The messages were already flowing. Merry Christmas from Chloe with a tree emoji. Morning fam from Julian. A candy cane sticker from Richard. Eleanor sent a photo of the dining table set for 4. White plates, red napkins, candles. 4 chairs, 4 place settings. I counted them the way I count rebar spacing on a drawing. Precisely without emotion, because the number is the number. At 9:48 a.m., I tapped the draft I'd saved 3 weeks earlier and hit send. Merry Christmas. Your realtor will explain the rest. 1 line, no emoji, no punctuation drama, just a sentence and a period. I set the phone on the desk, screen up, and watched. The typing indicator appeared under Chloe's name, then vanished, then appeared under Eleanor's name, then vanished. Julian's appeared for a full 10 seconds. Vanished. Nobody sent a word. The chat that had been buzzing with cheer 4 minutes ago went absolutely silent. The kind of silence that doesn't mean nobody has anything to say. but means everybody has too much. I picked up my coffee. It was still warm. I took a sip and waited. 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. The typing bubble appeared and disappeared 6 more times. Nobody could figure out what to say, because my message didn't give them anything to argue with. I didn't accuse. I didn't cry. I didn't explain how I knew. I just aimed them at the one person who had the paperwork in front of her. Victoria Sterling, who by now had already left a voicemail with my mother, explaining that the title had an unresolved co-ownership issue, and the December 26th closing was suspended pending further review. The phone stayed silent for 4 more minutes. Then it started ringing. Julian called first. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Chloe tried next, 3 times in 90 seconds. I watched the screen like I was monitoring a seismograph. Then Eleanor. Her name flashed over and over, call after call, the phone vibrating so hard it slid an inch across the desk each time. I didn't pick up. Richard texted. The first actual text he'd sent me in months. Call your mother. I read it and set the phone back down. The calls kept coming. I opened a notes app and started a tally because I'm an engineer and that's what I do with data. I track it. Julian. 14 calls in the first 20 minutes. Chloe, 9. Eleanor, 22. Richard, 3 calls, 2 more texts. Both just call home. Chloe sent a private message. Gloria, what does that mean? What realtor? Please call me back. I didn't reply. Eleanor left a voicemail. I played it once. Her voice was high, cracked fast. Gloria, I don't know what you think you know, but you need to call me right now. This is a family matter and you are blowing it out of proportion. Blowing it out of proportion. The woman who orchestrated a 3-year campaign of fake dates and managed exclusion was telling me I was overreacting. I played it a second time, not because I needed to hear it again, but because I wanted to make sure the transcript saved correctly. It did. Julian left one too, shorter, angrier. You had no right to go behind our backs. Call me. Behind their backs, as if the group chat I was never supposed to see was the front. I screenshotted the voicemail transcript and saved it next to the 52 messages and the deed scan and the estate cleanup, PDF. The phone kept buzzing. By 10:48, exactly 1 hour after I'd sent the message, the tally was 104 calls. 104. I wrote the number on the notepad, circled it, and set down the pen. For 3 years, they couldn't be bothered to dial my number on Christmas. Now they couldn't stop. Here's what I learned later, pieced together from Chloe's version and from what Victoria Sterling confirmed through Arthur. Victoria had left a voicemail for Eleanor on December 23rd, a professional courtesy. The title search had flagged a co-owner, me, who had not been consulted or included in the sale process. Victoria recommended pausing the closing until the issue was resolved. Eleanor didn't tell anyone. She assumed she could handle it after Christmas. She figured she'd call Victoria on the 26th, smooth it over, maybe tell her I was estranged and wouldn't be a problem. She didn't call me. She didn't mention Victoria's message to Julian or Richard or Chloe. She buried it the way she'd buried every complication I ever represented. Quietly, confidently, on her own schedule. Then my message landed in the chat, and Victoria's voicemail stopped being a problem she could postpone and became a crisis she couldn't contain. Julian called Victoria at 10:15 on Christmas morning. Victoria, to her credit, was measured. She told him what she'd already told Eleanor. The title showed 2 owners. Only one had authorized the sale, and the closing could not proceed until the other co-owner, Gloria Marie Tomas, either consented to the transaction or the parties reached a legal resolution. Julian asked what legal resolution meant. Victoria explained, a partition action, filed in court, heard by a judge, a matter of public record. She said it could take months. She said the buyer had already been informed and was considering withdrawing the offer. Julian hung up. According to Chloe, he walked back into the dining room, set his phone on the table between the white plates and the red napkins, and said, "She's on the deed. The whole thing's dead." Eleanor sat down. Her hand went to her mouth. Richard stared at his plate. The same man who'd sent a laughing emoji 3 weeks earlier now had nothing on his face at all. Chloe said the room stayed silent for a full minute. Nobody touched the food. The candles Eleanor had lit were still burning, wax pooling in the holders. Finally, Julian said, "We need a lawyer." Eleanor's chin trembled. "She's ruining everything." She said it twice. Nobody disagreed, and nobody corrected her. Chloe went to the kitchen and stood by the sink and called me for the 9th time. I didn't answer that one either. At 11:20, I picked up the phone and called back. One call. I chose Eleanor's number because she was the architect, and I wanted her to hear this from me directly, not filtered through Julian or paraphrased by Chloe. She answered on half a ring. "Gloria, what have you done?" Her voice was wet and shaking, the cry that comes out when the script fails and there's no backup. I could hear the room behind her, Julian's voice low and angry, Chloe sniffing, the clink of a fork being set down hard. She had me on speaker. Good. I wanted all of them to hear this. "I haven't done anything, Mom." Victoria Sterling did a title search, which is standard. She found my name on the deed, which has been recorded for 8 years, and she paused the closing, which is what title companies do when there's an ownership issue. My voice was level. I'd rehearsed it the way I rehearse presentations to building inspectors. Facts first, short sentences, no editorializing. "You are ruining this family," Eleanor said. Julian in the background. "This is insane. She hasn't lived there in years." I let the noise pass. Then I said, "You told me the wrong date." Again. "You planned to sail around my absence. You sent me a deed of sale disguised as estate paperwork and expected me to sign it without reading." I read it. Silence. Then Eleanor, softer now, the pivot to guilt. "We were going to tell you, Gloria. We were going to split the money. You would have gotten your share." "When?" I asked. "Before or after closing?" She didn't answer. "You told me the wrong date like last year." I let the sentence sit. Then, "The deed has the right one." Richard's voice, barely above a murmur, cutting through the room. "We shouldn't have done it that way." Nobody responded to him. He didn't say anything else. That was his one honest moment. 7 words, too late, aimed at no one, landed on nothing. I told them my attorney's contact information and said that any further discussion about the property should go through him. I wished them a Merry Christmas. I meant it. Then I hung up, set the phone face down on the desk, and sat in the silence of my own apartment, where nobody was planning anything behind my back. The closing on December 26th did not happen. Marcus Vance, the buyer, withdrew his offer 2 days after Christmas. His agent cited the unresolved title issue and said his client wasn't interested in waiting for a legal process with an uncertain timeline. Victoria Sterling called Arthur on the 28th, the day I was supposed to have shown up for leftovers, and confirmed that the listing was being pulled pending resolution of the co-ownership dispute. Julian's loan went into default in January. The bank sent a formal notice to both him and Eleanor, who had co-signed. Without the sale proceeds, there was no lump sum to clear the debt, and Julian's firm didn't generate enough to cover the monthly payments. I didn't learn this from them. I learned it from Chloe, who called me in February, voice small and raw, and said, "Everything's falling apart." I told her I was sorry things were hard. I meant it. Then I told her what I'd told Arthur to communicate. I was willing to discuss the property, but only at a proper mediation with a neutral third party, and only if my ownership interest was fully acknowledged. No side conversations, no PDF surprises, no just sign here, sweetheart. The mediation happened in March. Eleanor, Julian, Richard, and I sat in a conference room at Arthur's office in Boston. Chloe didn't come. She said she couldn't handle it, which was honest. Eleanor cried twice during the first hour. The first time was strategic. The tears she uses to signal that she's the victim. The second time was real, I think, when the mediator laid out the numbers and she realized that the house she'd grown up in, the house her own mother had built a life in, was now a problem she couldn't solve without the daughter she'd spent 3 years excluding. Julian said almost nothing. Richard sat with his hands folded and his eyes on the table. I presented 2 options. We could sell the property together, with proceeds split according to our recorded ownership, 50-50, as the deed stated, and with a proper transparent closing. Or I would buy out Eleanor's share at fair market value, appraised by a licensed professional. I didn't offer a third option. I didn't negotiate against myself. Julian finally spoke. He leaned forward and said, "Sylvia would have wanted us to keep it in the family." I looked at him for a long moment. "Sylvia did keep it in the family," I said. "She put my name on it." "The question is whether you consider me family." The mediator suggested a break. We took 10 minutes. When we came back, Eleanor asked if we could just go back to how things were. The mediator asked her to clarify. She couldn't. We agreed to the sale. The house went back on the market in April with a new listing agent, not Victoria, because Eleanor refused to work with her again, which was fine. It sold in May for $820,000. My share, after closing costs, was $402,000. I deposited it into a savings account and didn't touch it. Before the new buyers moved in, I drove to Port Haven one last time. I parked on Willow Creek Lane, walked up the porch steps, and put the iron key into the lock. It still fit. The door opened into an empty house that smelled like fresh paint and wood polish. I stood in the living room where Sylvia's velvet chair used to be, and I didn't cry. I just looked around, said thank you to nobody and everybody, and pulled the door shut behind me. I took the key off my ring and left it on the porch railing. The only thing of Sylvia's that stayed with the house. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. They spent 3 Christmases making sure I wouldn't find out, coordinating dates I'd never be invited to, and doors I'd never walk through. And not one of them stopped to remember that the woman they kept writing off the guest list had been written onto the deed years before by the one person in that family who actually saw her. That's my story. 52 messages, 1 reply, and 104 calls I let ring. If this reminded you that your name belongs on your own life, not in someone else's footnotes, take that as your sign. Set the boundary today. And if someone you love needs to hear this, share it with them. Thank you for being here.